Hi there, this is Cliff Dunning, your host at Earth Ancients, presenting a short talk here on the mysteries of the Olmec, but more importantly, the lead archaeologist, Matthew Stirling, who was the is the most prominent figure in the excavation of the Olmec sites at Leventa. So this is a short talk. I think you'll enjoy it, and I'm also going to provide the slides after the presentation that you can go through at your pace and see what you got there. So what do we know about the Olmec? Current dating has them establishing cities in Central America, Mexico today, around 1500 BC to 300 BC. And that's based on the organic material that we have discovered at Leventa. But my feeling is, as they continue to excavate and use ground penetrating radar, they're going to find even older dates than 1500. But we'll have to wait and see as the technology gets more refined and they can use ground penetrating radar and begin to excavate a little deeper. No known buildings exist in the cities that are known as to be Olmec. There's a mud pyramid and a tremendous number of foundations and foundational structures that have been found, but no standing buildings have ever been found in the area of Leventa and the other cities. Curious, the Olmecs appear to be complete when they're discovered. In other words, there is no developmental period that they've been able to find leading up to the period of 1500 BC to 300 BC. So in other words, they were a complete civilization, very advanced, highly evolved, and we'll see some examples of that shortly. They also nurtured a number of civilizations like the Maya, and archaeologists believe that they influenced the Maya to a pretty high degree in terms of astronomical precisions in mathematics, medicine, and some of the other sciences. We now know, after excavations at El Mirador in Guatemala, that the Maya are contemporaries of the Olmec and were developed around the same time. So they probably exchanged a lot of technology. There's just no way to know, when you're talking about 3,000 years ago, how people were communicated with other civilizations. We just don't know. Any documentation's been destroyed, and what little we know is based on the writings on stelae, or standing monuments. What we don't know is really how old the people are, and like I'm saying, they've been C14 or carbon dated at about 3,000 years old, but I feel they're much older. We don't know where the Olmec originated. They basically landed in Central America, or they migrated from somewhere and just built their cities and progressed there. There's no history of their culture. We do know from native prophecy that a number of the Central American people migrated from places like Outland, unknown to us today, probably places that were destroyed in the cataclysm of 9,500 BC. So anyhow, we don't really know where they originated. Why are there so few clues to their development? We just don't know. There's just nothing available. What were their building construction techniques and methods? How did they develop the methods of cutting into basalt volcanic rock with the ease of, you know, like cutting into scooping butter or cutting into butter. We don't know what they used to carve their massive basalt heads that are they're most widely known for. There's a lot of science involved that we haven't really looked at, because most likely our science isn't able to perceive their science. In other words, we haven't developed the sensing devices, the tools, the analytical tools to be able to understand what they use to cut stone and to carve and to build. Finally, the dating, the C14 dating, was not fully developed until the 1970s, and so most of the dating that Stirling did was based on the deciphering of the stone monuments and what was known at the time. Stirling is an interesting fellow. He got the National Geographic Society to fund a research project of excavating the three known Olmec cities of Tres Abotas, Laguna, Leventa, and San Lorenzo. Those are the most widely known cities. And he not only convinced the National Geographic, he also got them to fund a number of major excavations. We can see him here in the left on horseback as he embarked on his first major excavation, which was San Lorenzo. And he took his wife with him here on the right, Marion Stirling, who was his secretary at the Smithsonian Institute. Went with him and was apparently as hardy as he was, and you know, in those days the jungle had malaria and you know, a lot of really deadly environments to deal with. So she was with him the whole way. Here's Stirling below here with one of his early discoveries, altar number 5. So Stirling was quite a unique individual. What he uncovered was pretty amazing. He uncovered large monoliths. Here to the left is a sarcophagus that weighed several tons. I have not been able to track down where the top of this sarcophagus is, but I know the base is available to see at Leventa. And there were a number of these massive sarcophagus that he found, and it was just a shock to him and his team, because they had no idea that the Olmec were as sophisticated as they were. On the right here is a photograph he took of a sculpture, a bearded sculpture, never before seen bearded figure from Leventa. And to the left here is a massive sculpture that was part of a building, but the buildings, you could find nothing that would support it, so it's basically freestanding. This is a carved monolith that was probably part of a freestanding building, but the building was destroyed in some kind of an event. To the right, he discovered a number of toys. The upper toy here, the one on the top right, is typically what we see for the Olmec. The Olmecs were aware of the wheel, but the ones that he found have the axles, but the wheels are missing. Either they're missing or they were removed before the photographs were taken. I don't know. It's hard to say. But he discovered a lot of toys. You can see that these are very sophisticated looking toys too. A lot of them were from molds, which a lot of civilizations in Mexico used to create mass produced items. Most people understand or recognize the Olmecs from the massive basalt carved heads, and Stirling discovered 17 of these, and each of them was unique. Each had a unique face. Each had its own helmet, some with insignia of rank, a rank that no one can decipher. And it's hard to say if these were military figures, generals, like the Roman generals, or if these were travelers. And these helmets signified rank of, a number of travel places they've been to or whatever. No one really knows. But he uncovered, as I said, 17 of these, each carved in basalt, which is one of the hardest rocks to carve in. And oddly, they're all Negroid, or African American, as we would say today, which is confusing because most people think of Mexican cultures or Central American cultures as kind of native mixes, and the African American look has really been odd for a lot of people and confused people. All are male figures, and the average height is between 5 and 12 feet, which is huge, but it's the sheer weight of these items. They're 5 to 20 tons. This figure in the middle here is 20 tons, and they can only speculate that they roll them down from 200-300 miles from the quarry. They don't know how they got them to Leventa and to the other cities. Some of the unsolved mysteries and some of the characteristics of a very sophisticated society are waterworks or hydraulics, and Stirling excavated and found extensive waterworks in Laguana and in Leventa, which means that they had water that came from underwater aqueducts and rivers right into the city. There's even some discovery on a sewage treatment center, and on the right here you see a stick pointing to a central underground waterway that may have been a treatment center. But to develop hydraulics or water system is very, very advanced, and it's what we take for granted today, and the Olmec developed that. So this is one of the unsolved mysteries about the Olmec that people don't really realize that Stirling discovered. Another thing he discovered is there were more than one race of people there. Below here you can see what we have today in terms of the diversity of culture. We have Caucasians, white, Negroid, black, yellow, Asian, and then the red, which are native of America, and there's other red people around the world. What Stirling discovered was Asiatic, and then a longhead culture is what I call it, a longhead culture. He excavated extensive grounds that had skeletal remains of longheads. You don't read about him in the National Geographic. You have to read about it in his journals and others' books. But the longheads were very curious, and they're depicted in a lot of Olmec art. And they're really, we don't know where they came from. So obviously they've died out because there's no more longheads today. And then there was the African American or the Negroid, which are the huge basalt heads that we're familiar with. And then finally we're going to talk about the Caucasian or the white figures, the white civilization that was part of the Olmec culture. So he basically discovered a fourth culture that is extinct. His most unusual discovery was what he called the Uncle Sam monument. And the Uncle Sam monument was, you can see here to the left, was buried partially in the ground. It took him 2 days to excavate, and this monolith weighed 20 tons, was 14 feet high, 7 feet wide, and 3 feet thick. and it was the most unusual monolith because the figures were all wearing very unusual helmets, and these are not the typical helmets in battle. These are full head helmets that look like they were used for environmental needs. In other words, zero oxygen. And it was a massive undertaking to excavate this. He called it the Uncle Sam because of the one central figure who has a full beard and has a bent nose, a very Roman nose. A number of different artists, archaeological artists, have represented the Uncle Sam figure as a chief or a king. But I find it interesting that most of the well-known Mayanists have taken photographs of this figure. To the left here, this is Linda Sheely, and up here is Linda Sheely, who's a very well-known Mayanist. Here's Michael Coe, and here is Coe again. And you can see that they're all focusing on the head part, the unique head of this individual, who Stirling called Uncle Sam. Here we see the beard, which is kind of an odd beard, but it's a beard, and then it connects to this large earpiece, which looks more like a headset to me, a receiving headset, and then it comes up along the top here. And this is more, if you look here closely, you can see it more. It's actually, to me, it's more like a helmet. It's more like a flight helmet. So you can see that the interest in this one figure, this Uncle Sam monolith, is of great interest to a lot in the scientific community. So what are some of the other contributions that Stirling made? He dated the Olmec people at the time to 32 BC, but later changed it to 1400 BC, and he wasn't able to, and that was guesswork, and he was basically reprimanded by those others in the scientific community for his beliefs that they were very, very old culture. But it wasn't until 15 years later that he was accredited, when carbon dating came out, to actually have a truthful date, and it was 1400 BC. He excavated in Costa Rica. He was the president of the Archaeological Society in Washington, numerous awards at the National Geographic Society, and when he retired with the Smithsonian Institute, and really couldn't sit still, and was involved with a number of other research and exploration projects. He died in 1975 at age 78, and really isn't known as well as he should be for his contributions. He is really he convinced the National Geographic Society to continue to dig there and dig deeply enough to pull up these monoliths. So he set the stage to other people like Michael Coe and Linda Sheely to go after him in the 1960s and the early 1970s to continue excavating. So there you go. That's a short little look at the Olmec, the aspects that most people don't know about, and I'm going to post these for you to look at, and I hope you enjoy them. All right. Thanks.